the educator's perspective and the Irish perspective. When Peter was talking earlier on about the reasons companies set up in Ireland, he talked a lot about the tax regime. A very interesting report was launched just this week by the Economist Intelligence Unit, and it evaluated 120 cities around the world in terms of their competitiveness. Dublin came out number one of those 120 in terms of the quality and availability of human capital. I'm sure that applies to other cities like Cork and Galway as well, but it is something that Ireland stands proud of and I think is still a major factor in terms of setting up in Ireland for all of those companies. So having got that broad marketing bit out of the way, I'll move on then to each of the panelists, maybe to give 1 minute takeaway message and prediction, starting with Sean, please.
I guess my thought is more around the future and potential opportunity. It's funny, as Willie, you were talking about your grandmother and Google's not working. My son, when he can't get to something, says YouTube's not working. And what I'm saying is it's video consumption that youth are going to. When my son goes to find something out, he always goes to YouTube. He wants to watch the video and listen to it. As Netflix, everybody is showing, that's what's consuming all the traffic, and the amount of data that's flowing through networks is growing at a rate that there's no way networks can be built out to sustain that same level of growth. So I think that there is a huge opportunity for people to solve, the concepts of distributed networking. How can you use technology on a peer-to-peer level so that to the user they're getting the throughput to be able to watch either live TV essentially, or unbroken broadcast. But we're making use of the network. So the more people that are on the network using peer-to-peer type technologies, the faster the throughput is. It's a way of obfuscating from the users, the restrictions presented by the network by creating solutions that actually enable it better.
Thanks, Sean. I'm going to have to cut you short there. Can I have 30-second interventions or contributions just to finish off, because the next panel is dying to get up here for the next session. Una, please.
Well, I think that my remark would be with regard to the future, and particularly given the audience that's here today, and I'm sure that a lot of you have come wanting to know what are the types of solutions that are going to work in the American market and what appeals. And from, I am a person who runs a large data environment at my company. So, I would say that the future is for me as a client or a customer is to just see continuing to see all the great innovative things that people can do around analytics and data visualization that Neil referred to. I mean, those are the types of things that, and in a software as a service model, with being able to port it to the cloud, easily get it to, because if it's in Ireland, the other thing too that we need to make sure of is that pipe between the US and Ireland is, absolutely something that's very scalable and has that bandwidth, and I know that's, so anyway, that'd be I think how I'd leave
we'll hear from
today.
some pipe providers across the Atlantic in the next session, I think. Barry.
Yeah, I'll just talk about the relevance for Ireland for a minute, because I think that's important. So first of all, I agree with Brian. Cisco is not in Ireland because of tax. We're in Ireland because of the educated workforce, not just Irish people, but the open environment they have for attracting skilled graduates in from other countries. We have 200 people in Galway, 28 different nationalities, kids from all over Europe who are writing software for next generation collaboration applications. And I think, it's great that in Ireland, for example, we have the Microsoft 365 data center in Dublin, and we have PayPal's data center in Dublin. But I think the issue for Ireland now is really about jobs, not servers, right? So it's great to have buildings full of servers, but I think we need buildings full of people writing software. And that's why I'd say the direction for Ireland is build on that infrastructure we have now, but go after the application side. Go after developing big cloud applications.
Yeah.
That's where the future is, and that's where the jobs are. And that's what I'll be saying to the Minister when I see him tonight.
Thanks, Barry. Chris?
Yeah, just real quickly, I made the point earlier, but you know, the technology that cloud offers today is important, but the consumption and the utilization and focusing on that kind of end user experience on the mobile devices is essential. I can't think of many business opportunities that present themselves today where you can't have a very strong presence on the mobile devices. And you know, with the proliferation that we're seeing of smartphones and you know, the growth of connected devices worldwide, it's essential that you have that. The second part would just be a challenge, and that is, I think that events like this are spot on in bringing together university and technology leadership. I think the other thing that needs to occur is, you know, I would really encourage the folks out there as well as the Irish government officials to focus on making sure that there's proper engagement with innovation centers and activities that are taking place. I know that AT&T's taken a leadership position in this, working directly with John Hartnett and his very talented team and hosting some innovation sessions here in Palo Alto, and I would encourage a lot more of that. I think that's where the next set of ideas come, and I think it's critically important for the Irish companies to get access to the trends very early on what's taking place.
Could I just add that can only be enabled with the reinstatement of direct flights between Dublin and Silicon Valley. So I don't know if there's anyone in Aer Lingus in the room, but you know.
Keeping the cloud theme going.
Yes, exactly. Literally in the cloud. Yeah.
Finally, Neil.
Yeah, I think just reflecting on Roger McNamee's great talk earlier, it kind of compounded for me the view that we're kind of at the start of a new cycle of innovation. I think for me, the interesting stuff is in the same way electricity supply, when it's centralized, brought about a proliferation of electrical goods. We're going to see another proliferation of small to medium-sized enterprises, innovative ones. And I'll just leave you with one stat which I thought was interesting, was IDC came out saying that in the next 5 years, 25 million jobs will be created by this digital transformation, but 90% of those jobs will be in small to medium-sized enterprises. So I think that's really encouraging for what we see today.
Great point to finish on. Can I, on your behalf, everybody, thank Sean, Una, Barry, Chris, and Neil for a fantastic panel session.
And can I, on your behalf, thank Brian McCrath for moderating that panel so successfully and getting them to finish just about on time. It's a very exciting year, 2012. Brian mentioned the buzz around cloud computing and the phrase, and I was looking up, Googling, where that phrase came from. And the first official reported use of that term apparently was in August 2006 in San Jose, so we're not very far off, by Eric Schmidt, then CEO of Google, when he referred to data storage systems and the internet and all that jazz. So I'm just saying, if cloud computing was first used here, I'm just throwing it out there that I think the next big thing is going to be in data waste management. You've got all the big data, what are you going to do with it? And how are you going to get rid of it? Because my head's bursting with all of this knowledge. And now we have an excellent speaker coming up next, Rory Mullen from IDA in Ireland. Rory leads the IDA's West Coast team and promotes Ireland as a location for housing businesses from all over the world in Ireland, particularly in the technology sector, and he does that very successfully. So I'm going to hand over to Rory now for the second speech of the afternoon.
Thank you. We can get the presentation put up, please. As Andra introduced me, my name's Rory Mullen. I manage the IDA's West Coast operations. What we have been doing, I'll put this up, we've obviously been promoting Ireland as a location. What we do is we go out, talk to US companies and try and convince them to put their European operations into Ireland. We've obviously had quite a bit of success over the last number of years, starting with, in the first way, particularly in the technology, the life sciences and the financial services area, concentrating on the technology today. Companies like IBM and HP that are still in Ireland, companies like Wang and Digital Equipment, DEC, who set up in Galway and are still there in some iteration, but got through the companies in the 80s, Apple, Intel, EMC, all set up in Ireland. through to Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, eBay, PayPal, VMware. From the West Coast last year alone, in the 3 of the biggest West Coast companies, Amgen, Intel and Google invested a combined $1 billion in Ireland. The reason they did that, I think tax is a part of it. I think probably even more important, as Brian said, is the talent, both the education system in Ireland, the people that the Irish workforce that is there, the people that can be attracted, as Barry has said, from all over Europe to come to Dublin, to come to Galway, to come to Cork, to come to locations in Ireland which are still very attractive locations for them. And even if there is particular expertise that's not available in the whole of Europe, we have a fast-track visa system which can bring the necessary people in from all over the world. So it really is that combination and that workforce that you can create in Ireland, combined with the taxation piece and the fact that we have been doing this successfully for 40 years, that we have such a track record in it. When we're talking to companies, a lot of the time we have, sometimes we're only talking with the operations piece if it's purely a cost driven. A lot of times we're talking with both the taxation people and with the operations people, because it has to make sense to both for both of them for the company to set up in Ireland. In the cloud space, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, between the 3 of them have announced investments of over $1 billion in Ireland in the data center space. We have data wholesalers. We have like Digital Realty Trust. We've Telecity Interaction with doing co-location and managed services. We really have the infrastructure which has grown up around the technology companies that we have in Ireland to enable companies to service their European markets from Ireland. And you can see across there, both from the people who've built their own, the data center operators, the users, the people who host data in Ireland, and the infrastructure providers that have developed up around that whole ecosystem. Because whilst it's important that projects like PayPal, who announced 1,000 people going into their new operations center in Dundalk, we recognize that whilst jobs are the primary thing we're trying to attract at the moment, having the data housed in Ireland gives another reason for companies to put substance in Ireland. And we will work with companies specifically to develop their data center capabilities to enable us to win projects, more substantial projects around their innovation, technology development, software development, customer support, the financial shared services. And we really do take a holistic approach with our companies to try and get as many of the activities as we possibly can. What the government has tried to do is to encourage the private sector to provide the infrastructure, both through the telecoms connectivity back to the US and into Europe and into the UK, to enable that to happen. There are over 32 carriers operating in Ireland. The latency is very low. It's a very competitive environment, and it's something that we have actually gone out and got people and talk to people to attract them in, to make sure that infrastructure is there. And that's continually evolving. I mean, Hibernian's new link, which is going to go up through Drogheda, Dundalk and across to Letterkenny, is going to allow us to offer very cost-effective alternatives from a data center point of view in areas of the country which are still, in which we're still allowed to offer incentives by the EU, and to try and get a lot of the data center development has been around the M50, has been around the Dublin Ring, and to try and drive that out further into the northwest. That's what that's going to allow us to do. The range of companies which in this space, in the whole technology area, is huge. The government is fully committed. FDI is a very important part of the government strategy. You'll be hearing the Minister this evening. I'm sure he'll mention it. The data centres, while not delivering a huge amount of jobs, we do see them as an important part of the ecosystem, and we are very prepared to work with companies to try and make sure that their operations can happen in Ireland. We're here based in Mountain View. We have a small operation down in Southern California as well. I'd like to thank both the ITLG and the panel for the opportunity to allow me up here to give the IDA spiel, which we're doing on a continuous basis to US companies, and I look forward to hearing the views of the panel on the cloud space. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. That was beautifully short and sweet, as well as being very informative. I'd like to welcome our second panel. Our moderator for the second panel is Norman Tajuddin. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Norman. Partner at Silicon Valley Gateway Partners. Please take your seat. Joining him on the panel are Joe Goldsmith, Vice President of Digital Realty Trust; Gary Connolly, Founder and CEO of G-Contact; Cian Blackwell, Partner at Grant Thornton Ireland and Head of our Cloud Computing Sector. Go, Cian. Stephen Dennison, Principal Solutions Architect at Level 3, and Ken Peterson, Chairman of Hibernia Atlantic. I'd like you to welcome them all on stage, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andra. So we have the tough position of being at the last one before the drinks are served later, so hopefully we'll keep everyone awake with our discussion. Based on the comments we heard earlier with Roger talking about having 143 terabytes of data in his house, granted that's atypical, but then having a gigabit connection, or Chris's comments earlier, 20 petabytes a day going through AT&T's networks with 800, close to 1 million miles of fiber laid in infrastructure. Really, this whole thing about the cloud then comes back to this user experience. There was a report today by the there was a recent study this morning actually was released talking about the users of tablets expecting pages to load within 2 seconds. If that's coming through an AT&T network, Verizon, or Orange, or anyone else overseas, that's a lot of stress on this network, this infrastructure. So what we're hoping today to talk about is looking at Ireland as a case study. For those of you, obviously, there are folks here from the US, there are folks from Ireland, but there are also some other folks from other countries looking at Ireland as a case study, is to really step back and look at Ireland's history to where they are today, how they got here as a leader in technology and data center and cloud, but then also where it's going. And with that said, I'd love to pass the first question off to Gary to tell us a little bit about the history of Ireland's technology sector.
Of course, Norman. I'd like to think that you all know that I wasn't born when the first FDI went to Ireland in 1956, but I've been asked to say a few words about how we've evolved and how our ecosystem has evolved. It's taken the guts of 54 years to get to where we are now, and sorry, Rory, but IBM came to Ireland in 1956. The IDA didn't get set up until 58, so they can't take credit for that one. But I think it was true to say at that time it was to do with microprocessors, mainframes, minis, cluster controllers, etc. So we saw a proliferation of IBM, Digital, Amdahl coming to Ireland, and they were the ICT people of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, leading to the 80s when we started to see some of the hardware guys coming in. Intel came in, EMC, and Apple. Interesting, like all things with Microsoft and Apple. Apple went to Cork, Microsoft went to Dublin. But I think that was the way that Gates and our friend were always. We also saw in the 80s some new software companies. Up to then it was very much hardware. We saw Lotus coming in, Microsoft and Informix. Low end, we were very much a fulfillment house, packing mice into boxes, duplicating disks. Wasn't at the high end side, but it was shown that we had the pedigree, we did large diaspora, wanted to come back to Ireland and start getting in at the services side. The 90s saw, previously said, companies staying in Ireland but moving up the food chain. Microsoft, for instance, started to get into localization. Now we started to get more knowledge jobs. They retained their large presence in the fulfillment side, but now they were doing localization for up to 32 languages at one stage with Mandarin, German, all the main languages where Microsoft were distributing their product. We also saw the PC guys, Dell, Gateway, AST, UPC, they all came in as well, all over the country, mainly on the whole fulfillment of the product. distribution of the product, and with that, their contact centers, their call centers, etc. So we constantly were changing, modifying, moving up the food chain, up to the late 00s. And I think it's significant that we talk about the 00s in terms of this panel, because the dot-com bubble was great for the data center industry in Ireland. We started to see public-private partnerships between Global Crossing, British Telecom. We had Colo.com, we've got WorldCom, we've got all the big data center guys buying up the real estate, putting in, as Barry says, multiple megawatts of data, resilient paths for fiber. It was a pity that by the time they actually got to the revenue model, they'd gone bust and left them behind. But that was fantastic because we had them sitting there. We'd over 2.2 billion spent on data center infrastructure, not just the data centers, but the transatlantic fibers, the low latency fibers, diverse routes between Ireland, the US, and also between Ireland and the UK. So at the tail end of the zeros, we then had all the dot-com guys, Yahoo, PayPal, came to Dublin. Initially, I questioned Barry on one little bit that data centers do create jobs. PayPal, as he said, announced 1,000 jobs last week. The first entry into Ireland was a single rack in a data center owned by ServCentric. So they are the catalysts, they're honeypots. And obviously lately now we're starting to see lots of the add-on products to the likes of Facebook with Zynga. PopCap games are coming around. So that's the evolution. We'd like to think every decade kept ahead, or certainly on par with what was big and a hit at that time in the ICT industry.
So the transition didn't definitely happen overnight then? Now,
No.
Cian, coming from Grant Thornton, what are some of the, when you look back at these different events, the different companies that have come in, the different types of investments, from your frame of reference, what were the things that were so critical to making that happen, right? These companies didn't go to Ireland for nothing. There was a reason why they came there. So what were some of those reasons that
Well, they've changed over time. I think from what Gary said, it's been fairly clear that what companies have been looking to do when they invest in Ireland have been very different, and it's changed over the years, and that's changed. There's been a combination of changes because of the global economy and because of what companies want to do, but also changes because of the environment that's offered in Ireland. So you saw when things really started picking up for foreign direct investment in the 80s, it was about manufacturing, as Gary was saying. It was about the fact that a 10% tax rate was offered to manufacturing companies, so companies came to Ireland and they did that. But that started off a gradual move up the value chain, I think. So into the 90s then, there was still manufacturing activities going on, and there still are to this day, but there's the focus changed to effectively Ireland acting as an aggregator. So we provided shared service centers, call centers, and customer contact centers for jurisdictions around Europe. So effectively taking the burden away from the US or the parent company and aggregating all of this into Ireland, providing a pool of skilled labor to do that and providing services. The model has changed even further beyond that. Although that shared service model is still pretty crucial at the moment, there's an increasing trend to move further up the value chain, providing international, global locations, or rather global centralization, so that every jurisdiction outside of North America is serviced from Ireland for a lot of companies. So companies like LinkedIn, for example, have all their international headquarters, even for Latin America, based in Ireland. So it's that, and that's seen another trend as well, where things are pushed offshore even further. So the companies like Yahoo, for example, are moving processes to Romania, to India, further afield, so that the stuff that's left in Ireland is very much further up the value chain. So that's pretty crucial. What's driven that, I think, from the Irish perspective is a willingness to change in terms of the regulatory framework. And you can't underestimate the importance of a responsive government policy and just seeing the value of foreign direct investment, but also being able to see when the winds are changing and when things are going to have to be modified. So, for example, the initial low tax rate, the 10% rate, which was for manufacturing companies, for grant-aided companies, and for financial services companies, that all expired about a decade or so ago. And what really changed was the decision by the government to replace that 10% rate for selected companies with a 12.5% rate for all companies, so that everything that was happening in Ireland could be taxed at this single and very transparent tax rate.
Wow, great. Now, obviously, the regulatory frameworks, the tax environment, the financial incentives, and so on. What are some other key attributes? I mean, this is open for any of the panelists here. What are the other key attributes that led to the success in Ireland in the technology sector, whereas other countries may have failed?
We're likable.
That's always a plus.
Guinness,
Guinness, that's
37.5 million American diaspora. But I think
I've heard people say that the tax climate, you know, the intellectual property climate, the availability to a bunch of smart people, that climate is what helped Ireland to succeed. I would say the climate was a big piece of this, because somebody asked earlier about how you're going to green things up as you need more and more megawatts of power, as you need, you know, more and more servers. How are you going to keep that from causing, you know, some kind of an impact to the environment? And Ireland is perfectly suited from a climate perspective to provide practically conditioned cool air from the outside. So you can use evaporative cooling instead of, you know, chillers. So you're not consuming as much electricity. Great for the business, great for the environment.
excellent.
I think also adaptability. I mean, we have to look at, as we said earlier, the likes of Microsoft, for instance. Microsoft, the only country outside of the United States that has all disciplines for Microsoft is Ireland. It's the only country that has all their disciplines. And that's an adaptability from the 80s.
It's the only native English-speaking country in the Union.
Yeah, I think
Is that correct?
yeah, in the Eurozone, yeah, definitely. And I think that there's been an element of luck and circumstances as well, and being English speaking has been a
very helpful.
benefit. You know, we didn't plan it that way, but it worked out well. And
Right.
I think likewise, being a member of the EU, having the benefit of being a member of the Eurozone as well, being in a situation where even the fact that we're culturally attuned to the US, we've got a huge Irish diaspora in the US, and the fact that there's people representing the country has been very positive. So there has been an element of luck, and relying on luck is a terrible business strategy, but being able to take advantage of luck is a very good business strategy. So being able to do that, I think, has been crucial for us.
So Lucky Irish is a true statement then.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent. What about the educational systems? How have that supported the growth of the tech sector?
Well, it was heartening to see at the weekend that there was a recent release of the CAO, which is the Central Applications. And for probably the last decade, it's been architects and QSs and engineers and mechanical electrical, and that they've been inundated on requests for engineers in the ICT space, science subjects, etc. But I think it's really about, as was said earlier, it's about the retention of our goods people and the attraction of good people. That's the key. And I think our scale helps us. We're 4 million people. If you talk about earlier the foreign direct investment, what makes Ireland good? It's very transparent. Ireland is transparent, where the same law applies to Dublin as does to Donegal. The same rules apply. The IDA have a few small incentives for research and development. But that's not the case in other jurisdictions, bigger countries where they've got more incentives for periods of time. It's less transparent. So I think in terms of education, I think that the kids coming through can see where the dollars are, and they're gravitating towards it, which up to now we've been saying that the dollars are there, but there may have been easier dollars in some other stuff.
Great, appreciate that. So now we've taken a look backwards to see how the technological landscape has evolved here in Ireland.